and welcome to the interview on France 24. Our guest today is Debbie Stothard, who is the coordinator for the alternative ASEAN Network on Burma, which is a regional human rights organization. She's also the Deputy Secretary General of the International Federation of Human Rights, and her visit to Paris coincides with that of the celebrated Burmese pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Thank you very much for being on the program.
You're welcome.
It's obviously marvelous to see Aung San Suu Kyi walking around European capitals, being feted everywhere, having her freedom finally. But of course, moral authority is not enough to change the situation in Burma.
Well, that's definitely true. We're still, while we are celebrating Aung San Suu Kyi's ability to visit Europe, the story is not yet over for Burma. There are still many serious problems happening in the country, including the war in Kachin state, which has just entered its second year. So Aung San Suu Kyi will be returning to Burma to face a lot of challenges. Unfortunately, her party only holds 6% of the seats in parliament, and we are very concerned that the country, the government itself, may not be keen to make the necessary legal and institutional reforms to ensure that the majority of the people in Burma do get the livelihood, the basic needs that they want, and also the freedoms that they deserve.
Let's backtrack a second to the problems first in the country. You mentioned the war. There's also dire poverty still stemming from decades of economic isolation. So are we in a state where politics can actually achieve anything at all, or are these problems too intractable, the ethnic tensions, the war, and the land and poverty issues?
Well, we have to go back to the time when Burma first gained its independence in 1948. In those days, it was considered the Asian country most likely to succeed because it had a high rate of literacy, a high education standard, and also it was incredibly rich in natural resources. But what has happened in Burma, what has brought Burma to this, is bad governance, not bad luck. And I think in order to turn Burma around, we do need to see a change in the way the government operates and a change in the way the laws are designed and the institutions are run. So it is important to realize that this was a rich, functional, thriving country that has been brought to its knees by bad governance, by various military regimes. So we do need to actually use that. We do need to review the laws. We do need to get a rule of law and all the other institutions up and running. But most importantly, we do need to have justice and transparency in the country.
Is there any likelihood of any of those things even beginning when we're still working with the institutions as they are today? And within the current status quo, as you said, her party only has 6%.
I think it is possible as long as the international community doesn't give up. We've noticed that the government has made various concessions, including releasing Aung San Suu Kyi and allowing her freedom of movement and allowing her to run in the recent by-election so that she became a member of parliament. However, we noticed that they haven't yet gone into what we call the fundamental reforms so that people can actually enjoy those benefits. So we do actually need to understand that this is because of international pressure. Those positive changes happened because of international pressure, and the authorities are hoping that the pressure will ease off now that Aung San Suu Kyi is free. In fact, now is the time we do need to put on more pressure to ensure that real reforms happen.
Who's that pressure going to come from? I mean, Aung San Suu Kyi has asked European governments to help, but some people are skeptical about whether governments really can make a difference. Where do you think the help should come from?
I think governments can make a difference, and governments and corporations, international organizations, and pretty much everyone who has an interest in Burma. if we don't take advantage of the situation now to push and work with various parts of the country to get those actual reforms, we may actually face the danger of seeing another humanitarian and political and security crisis happening somewhere along the line. We are already seeing crises break out in places like Arakan State and, of course, the war in Kachin State. We are also seeing the highest number of people displaced in eastern Burma in the past 10 years. So we're already seeing the beginnings of, we're seeing that those crises are existing, new crises are happening. So it is in the interest of everyone to make sure that the government of Burma does institute actual change.
Tell us about the work of ALTSEAN, this alternative. Firstly, it sounds like a non-official version of ASEAN. So what are you doing, and why are you called that?
Well, we were formed in 1996 before Burma was joining ASEAN. At that time, it was assumed that ASEAN didn't care for human rights and democracy in Burma. And we wanted to make the point very clearly that it was the people of ASEAN that cared about human rights and democracy in Burma. And hence, we felt we had the right to call ourselves Alternative ASEAN Network on Burma. Since then, we've also, we've created pressure in the region itself so that ASEAN leaders have had to talk about human rights and democracy in Burma and also try and engage in solutions. So that's why we're named ALTSEAN Burma.
And you're based personally on the Thai-Burmese border, or at least you go there a lot. What are you doing there? What are your experiences there with the Burmese people?
Well, we are very lucky because we were one of the first organizations to set up a women-specific training program for women activists from Burma back in the 90s. And we continue to deliver all sorts of trainings for grassroots organizations and also some leaders in the movement from the different parts of the movement on economic policy, on advocacy and documentation strategies, and we even have a women's creative writing program so that women who are refugees and migrants and displaced have an avenue to express themselves and to share their stories.
You're giving the refugees from Burma skills to essentially be able to do something with their lives, would you say?
We're not giving them skills. We're creating a situation where they can get their own skills. But having said that, we also run websites, and we produce 24 publications a year, mainly monthly bulletins that help people in the international community understand the situation in Burma. They are very densely summarized bulletins and also briefers on topics of interest. We often joke that we don't like to violate your human rights by making you read long human rights reports, so these are between 3 to 10 pages.
What's going to happen then to the refugees that you've been dealing with? I mean, have any of them gone back to Burma, or do you see a growing refugee issue there?
Well, there has been a lot of concern that refugees will be forced back to Burma against their will. Firstly, we need to understand that the reasons that they have been forced out of their homes still exist. We also have to understand that some of the villages that they came from are still very heavily landmined and are not safe. And so we do need to ensure that refugees have a place to return to and that they feel confident and they're willing to do so. What we're seeing is a starvation of funds and support for those refugee camps. And it looks like the international community is somehow hoping that the refugees will go back somehow.
One of those issues you touched on before is land in Burma, which is still a huge problem, isn't it? It's expropriation of land, which is causing this refugee crisis to continue.
Well, yes. Actually, very disturbingly, last year the Parliament brought in a law that legitimizes the practice of confiscating land from local people. Now the central government essentially has the right to confiscate land in any part of the country for any purpose as long as they decide that it's in the national interest. And we have seen increasing numbers of communities facing this problem. In one community in Shan State, for example, 63% of the families had their land confiscated within a 5-year period. And for most of these communities, they need land to grow food to feed themselves.
The international community, though, surely is very limited in what it can do, because, as you were describing, the military essentially still has a lot of power, and a lot of people would argue that the changes have been very minor in allowing the pro-democracy parties to have some form of growth.
I think what we're seeing in Burma is a process of change that was intended by the military to be a surface change, but there is a growing expectation that this change should really happen on the ground, and that's why we do need to take advantage of this internal momentum that the international community, including governments and corporations, pressure the authorities to actually change the legal framework and the institutional framework, and to let people live in safety, that they can have safe lives where they can earn a livelihood. Essentially, that's what everyone deserves.
We'll have to end on that note. Thank you very much for being with us, Debbie Stothard, coordinator for the Alternative ASEAN Network on Burma. That's all we have time for on the France 24 interview.